You won't believe what I discovered when I woke up to Jackhammered destroying my $15,000 wheelchair pathway, the same money I'd secretly donated to save our HOA from bankruptcy the month before. But when Karen, our power-hungry HOA board member, revealed this was just the beginning of her neighborhood takeover, how could I expose her schemes without revealing my identity as the HOA's mysterious benefactor? Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you want more Karen and HOA stories. The sound of jackhammers ripped me from my sleep at 7:30 a.m. sharp. I rolled my wheelchair to the window, my heart already racing before I even pulled back the curtains. What I saw made my blood run cold. 3 construction workers were destroying my front pathway, the special concrete ramp I'd spent months designing for wheelchair access to my home. I grabbed my phone and started recording, my hands shaking with anger as I watched them tear up the smooth, gently sloped path that had given me my independence back. The workers were wearing bright yellow vests with Thompson Construction printed on the back, the same company owned by Karen Thompson's husband. Of course, she was behind this. Just last month, I'd anonymously donated $155,000 to save our HOA from going broke. Nobody knew it was me. I wanted to help quietly after living here for 15 years. The funny thing, that donation was exactly what I'd spent on this pathway. Now here was Karen, our newest HOA board member, destroying it without even giving me a warning. I watched as Karen strutted across my front lawn and her designer workout clothes, clipboard in hand, directing the workers like she was conducting an orchestra. She'd moved in just 6 months ago and somehow already gotten herself elected to the HOA board. Since then she'd been making everyone's lives miserable with her constant violations and surprise inspections. Excuse me, I called out through my open window. What's going on with my pathway? Karen's head snapped up, her highlighted bob cut catching the morning sun. Oh, good morning. We're removing this unauthorized modification to bring the property back up to code. You should have received my notice last week. She smiled, that fake smile of hers, the one that never reached her eyes. I never got any notice, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. And this pathway is fully approved. I have all the permits right here in my files. Well, she said, checking her clipboard. According to the HOA bylaws section 47B, all external modifications must maintain aesthetic uniformity with the neighborhood standard. This pathway clearly doesn't match the approved concrete color palette. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The pathway matched our neighborhood perfectly. I'd made sure of it. Karen, I need this pathway to access my home. It's an ADA requirement. Rules are rules, she chirped, waving her clipboard. You can submit a new modification request at next month's board meeting. Make sure to include 3 color samples and a professional architectural rendering. Oh, and the review fee is now $500. My mind raised to the stack of legal documents in my office, the approved permits, the ADA compliance certificates, and most importantly, the proof of my donation that had saved our HOA from bankruptcy. I could reveal everything right now, show her who she was really messing with, but something told me to wait to document everything first. I kept recording as the workers continued destroying my pathway. My neighbor Sarah peeked out from behind her curtains. Across the street last month, Karen had made her tear out her beautiful rose garden because it attracted too many bees. Now Sarah gave me a sympathetic look and held up her phone. She was recording too as I watched Karen march around my front yard like she owned it. I thought about all the other neighbors she'd bullied. The Patels had to repaint their entire house because Karen decided their shade of beige was too ethnic. Mr. Rodriguez was fined for having his grandkids' bikes in his driveway for more than an hour. Even Mrs. Chen's award-winning koi pond was now under threat. The jackhammers kept pounding away at my independence, but with each crack in the concrete my determination grew stronger. Karen had no idea who she was dealing with. I had the permits, the legal rights, and most importantly a secret that could change everything. But as I watched her gleefully direct the destruction of my pathway, I realized this fight was about more than just me. It was about standing up to a bully who'd gone too far. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer's number. If Karen wanted to play hardball, she was about to learn she'd picked the wrong person to mess with. After all, how would she react when she discovered the anonymous donor she'd been bragging about saving their HO was the same person whose accessibility she was happily destroying? My wheels squeaked against the wet morning grass as I rushed outside, still in my pajamas, clutching the folder of permits I'd kept by my bedside ever since Karen started her HOA crusade last month. The jackhammer roar grew louder, and my hands shook as I watched chunks of my pathway scatter across my carefully tended flower beds. Stop this right now, I called out, my voice barely carrying over the noise. The workers paused, looking uncertainly between me and Karen, who stood there in her designer workout gear, tapping away on her phone like she was ordering coffee instead of destroying my independence. Oh, good, you're awake, Karen said, not even looking up. We tried to start early to minimize the disruption. Isn't that thoughtful of us? Her saccharine smile didn't reach her eyes as she finally glanced my way. I took a deep breath, remembering what my lawyer had said about staying calm in these situations. Karen, I have every required permit for this pathway. You can't just destroy approved modifications. She strutted over her expensive sneakers, crunch ing on the broken concrete. Actually, as they New head of the Architectural Review Committee. Can you see these? Permit. She finally looked at the papers I was holding. They were approved by the old board. We've implemented new guidelines. My neighbor Sarah peeked out her window, and I could see her recording everything on her phone. Good, we'd need evidence later. New guidelines can't be applied retroactively, I said, pulling out my tablet to show her the property laws I'd bookmarked. And the Americans with Disabilities Act clearly states. Oh please, Karen interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. Don't make this about disability, this is about property values. She wrinkled her nose. Improvised walkway doesn't match the community aesthetic. Just look at how it clashes with Mrs. Peterson's new landscaping. I glanced over at Mrs. Peterson's yard, which Karen had conveniently approved for a complete overhaul last week. The same Mrs. Peterson who'd hosted Karen's campaign meetings for HOA board president. The pathway matches the exact shade and texture of the community sidewalks, I countered, pulling up the contractor specifications. I made sure of that when I spent $155,000 installing it. Something flickered across Karen's face, surprise, interest, but she quickly masked it. By now other neighbors were emerging from their homes, drawn by the commotion. I could hear whispers. See phones recording. Karen noticed too. Well, she said, straightening her designer yoga jacket, if you have concerns about the new guidelines, you're welcome to submit them in writing to the board. We'll review them at next month's meeting. Until then, she turned to the workers. Continue. The jackhammer roared back to life, and Karen smiled, that plastic smile again. You might want to look into one of those nice fold-up ramps, much more convenient. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and you'll be receiving a bill for today's work. HOA regulations require homeowners to cover removal costs for unauthorized modifications. As I sat there watching my independence being literally jackhammered away, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd hoped I wouldn't need. Hello, Channel 5 News. I have a story about discriminatory housing practices you might be interested in. I raised my voice to make sure Karen could hear me over the jackhammer, and I have video evidence. The jackhammer stopped. Karen froze mid-step, and in that moment of sudden silence my phone pinged with a message from my lawyer. Got the injunction on my way. The war for my pathway had just begun, but Karen didn't know that I had one more card to play, one that would shake our entire HOA to its foundations. I just had to decide if I was ready for everyone to know exactly who had saved our community from financial ruin last month. I couldn't believe my eyes when I rolled into the emergency HO meeting. Karen had turned our community center into her personal courtroom, complete with a raised platform where she sat smugly behind a desk. The room was packed with neighbors I'd lived next to for years, many looking as confused as I felt. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped my folder of evidence. As I was saying before this interruption, Karen gestured dismissively toward my wheelchair. Unauthorized modifications are destroying our property values. She clicked through a slideshow of my pathway, zooming in on imaginary flaws. My blood boiled, but I kept my voice steady. Karen, would you like to explain why you rejected my perfectly legal permits? I asked, pulling out my documentation. The room fell silent. She blinked, clearly not expecting me to have paperwork. Those permits, she sputtered, aren't relevant because they weren't approved by me personally. A few neighbors exchanged worried glances. I could feel the room's energy shifting. That's when I played my trump card. Mr. Rodriguez, I called out to our elderly treasurer in the back, would you mind sharing the details of last month's anonymous donation? Mr. Rodriguez stood slowly, his weathered hands clutching a leather ledger. The donation of $155,000 saved us from having to triple everyone's HOA fees, he announced, his voice carrying authority. From 30 years as our treasurer. Without it we couldn't have fixed the pool pump or repaired the clubhouse roof. Karen's face turned an interesting shade of red. What does this have to do with anything? She snapped, shuffling papers nervously. I took a deep breath. I am the anonymous donor. The room erupted in whispers. The same amount I donated to help our community is exactly what I spent on my accessible pathway, which by the way increased my property value according to 3 different realtors. Karen frantically dug through her stack of papers, pulling out a yellow document with shaking hands. This bylaw from 1987 clearly states all external modifications must maintain aesthetic uniformity. She W it triumphantly. But I was ready. Interesting you should mention that bylaw, Karen. I projected my own slides onto the wall. Here's your new pool installation from last month. Notice anything different from the other backyards? The room gasped. Karen's pool was definitely not uniform with anything in our neighborhood. Her face paled as I scrolled through photos of other modifications she approved for her friends while denying similar requests from other neighbors. That's different, she stammered. I have special circumstances like my need for wheelchair access. I asked quietly. The room grew so silent you could hear the air conditioning hum. Mrs. Chen from 2 doors down stood up. Karen denied my request for a small vegetable garden, claiming it would look messy. Others began standing, sharing similar stories. Karen's carefully constructed Facade began cracking. "If you don't like how I run things, I'll just resign," she threatened, expecting us to beg her to stay. I leaned forward. "Before you do, maybe we should discuss the interesting email chain I found about your plans for the HOA funds." Karen's face went from red to white in record time. "The ones showing you plan to use our money to build your own pathway right after tearing down mine." The room exploded in outrage, but as I watched Karen's empire crumbling, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sad that it had come to this. All I'd wanted was to be able to enter my own home safely. I caught Mr. Rodriguez's eye. He nodded gravely, and stood again, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence." Karen looked around wildly, realizing too late that her power play had backfired spectacularly. As the hands went up one by one, I wondered what would happen next. Would Karen admit defeat gracefully, or did she have one final trick up her sleeve just when I thought I was fighting this battle alone? Sarah burst through the HOA meeting room doors, waving a thick blue folder. "I have proof," she shouted, her garden-stained hands trembling. Everyone turned to stare as she walked straight up to Karen, who suddenly looked like she'd seen a ghost. I watched in amazing amazement as Sarah, my quiet next-door neighbor, who'd lost her award-winning rose garden to Karen's rulebook last month, spread dozens of photographs across the conference table. "For 6 months, I've documented every single HOA violation Karen approved for her friends while denying everyone else," she explained, her voice growing stronger with each word. The room erupted into whispers as Sarah pointed to a photo of Karen's brand new swimming pool built 3 t closer to the property line than regulations allowed. Next to it, she placed a rejection letter Karen had sent to the Martinez family for the exact same request. The whispers grew louder. "That's not all." Sarah continued, pulling out her phone. She played a video of Karen accepting an envelope from her best friend Lisa right before approving Lisa's non-regulation fence height. My heart raced as more neighbors started standing up, sharing their own stories. Mrs. Chen from Unit 12 revealed how Karen had forced her to remove her small vegetable garden while approving a massive greenhouse for her own sister. Tom from the corner house described Karen had fined him for his son's basketball hoop but ignored the identical one in her nephew's driveway. Karen's face turned redder with each new accusation. She jumped up, knocking her chair backward. "This is ridiculous. I've only ever enforced the rules as written." But her voice cracked when Mr. Rodriguez quietly asked her to explain why her own recent home additions weren't in the HOA's approval records. I wheeled myself closer to the table, spreading out my own carefully organized documentation. "Karen, I've got copies of every building permit in our neighborhood for the past 5 years. Would you like to explain why yours are missing?" The room fell silent as Karen's perfectly manicured nails drummed nervously on the table. Suddenly my phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Channel 5 news van outside." I smiled, remembering the tip I'd sent them about questionable HOA practices in our community. Karen's eyes widened as she spotted the news crew through the window, their camera equipment glinting in the afternoon sun. More neighbors began sharing stories, forming a timeline of Karen's selective rule enforcement. The Anderson twins described how she'd threatened to fine THEIR mother for having a medical ramp similar to mine while allowing her friend to build an unauthorized deck. Each story added another piece to the puzzle, revealing the full picture of Karen's power abuse. But what happened next shocked everyone. Lisa, Karen's closest ally on the board, stood up with tears in her eyes. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, pulling out a stack of papers from her designer handbag. "Karen made me falsify these violation reports. She said she'd expose my past bankruptcy if I didn't help her." The room exploded into chaos. Karen lunged for the papers, but Mr. Rodriguez calmly stepped between them. I noticed our HOA lawyer in the back of the room quietly taking notes and nodding. This was bigger than my pathway now. It was about standing up to years of bullying and manipulation. Through the commotion, I caught Sarah's eye. She gave me a slight nod, and I knew tomorrow's newspaper would feature her detailed photo evidence alongside my story. Karen must have realized it too, because she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. But before she could leave, she turned back with a sneer that made my blood run cold. "You have no idea what you've started," she hissed, pulling out her phone and dialing a number we'd soon wish she hadn't. I never expected Karen to snap like this in front of everyone. But here we were. The emergency HOA meeting had turned into complete chaos when she jumped up from her seat, face red with anger, and shouted, "Fine, if you won't support my decision, I quit. Let's see how you run this HOA without me." The room fell silent. Mr. Rodriguez, our treasurer, calmly adjusted his glasses and pulled out a thick folder from his briefcase. "Before you make that decision, Karen, I think everyone should see these documents." My heart raced. I had given him those papers just hours before Karen's smug smile disappeared as Mr. Rodriguez started showing photos on the projector screen. There was Karen's new pool installation from last summer, the one that somehow got approved In just 2 days, while Mrs. Chen waited 6 months for permission to install a small toy pond, next came pictures of Karen's non-regulation fence, her oversized gazebo, and the tree she removed without permits. "You've been spying on me." Karen's voice shook with rage. She grabbed her designer purse, ready to storm out. "Actually," Sarah spoke up from the back, holding up her phone, "I just took pictures whenever I saw something that didn't match the rules you kept quoting to everyone else, and I'm not the only one." Other neighbors nodded, pulling out their phones and tablets. That's when I rolled my wheelchair forward and placed my own folder on the table. "Karen, remember last month when you said my donation to the HOA was just a drop in the bucket? Well, I had my lawyer look into something interesting." I pulled out the documents showing Karen's failed attempt to secure a $50 Sorum personal loan dated just 1 day before I made my anonymous donation. "The whispers started." Mrs. Chen gasped. Mr. Rodriguez cleared his throat and projected the HOA's bank statements. Karen was planning to use HOA funds to build her own private pathway and patio extension. When the anonymous donation came in, which we now know was from our friend here, she lost access to those funds. That's why she targeted this accessible pathway specifically. Karen's face turned pale. "You can't prove that I was just following the rules." "Actually," Bob from Unit 12 stood up, "I work at the permit office. I pulled these records legally." He held up more papers. Karen tried to submit personal renovation plans using HOA authorization codes. They were rejected 3 times. "This is ridiculous," Karen shrieked. A perfect bob haircut, now messy from running her hands through it. "I've managed this HOA for 5 years. You need me." Mr. Rodriguez adjusted his glasses again. "About that, I've called for an immediate vote of no confidence." All in favor hands shot up across the room. Even Karen's friend Linda, who always voted with her, raised her hand while avoiding eye contact. "You're all making a huge mistake," Karen sputtered, backing toward the door. "The property values will plummet. The neighborhood will fall apart. You have no idea what I've protected you from." That's when sweet old Mrs. Chen slowly stood up, clutching her cane. "Karen dear, I've lived here for 30 years. The only thing we needed protection from was you." The room erupted in applause. Karen's face crumpled as she realized she'd lost control, but then she straightened up, smoothed her hair, and pulled out her phone. "Fine, but before I go, everyone should know what your precious donor did 3 years ago at the—" "I wouldn't finish that sentence," Sarah interrupted, still holding up her phone. "I've been recording since you threatened to quit attempting to blackmail someone during an official HOA meeting. Probably wouldn't look good on your real estate license renewal, would it?" I watched as Karen's last attempt at revenge died on her lips. The woman who had terrorized our neighborhood for years finally showed her true self. Not a powerful HOA president, just a bully who didn't know how to handle losing control. But as Karen stormed out, slamming the door behind her, I couldn't help wondering what would she do next, because if there's one thing I'd learned about Karen Th's son, it's that she never went down without a fight. The morning of the final HOA meeting felt different. As I wheeled into our packed community center, every neighbor turned to look at me. Karen sat at the front, her designer purse clutched tight, still thinking she held all the cards, but she didn't know what was in my folder. I pulled out the first document, a full history of every HOA rule. Karen had broken herself, her unapproved pool installation, her non-regulation fence height, her illegal home business. Sarah had helped me gather everything, spending late nights going through old meeting minutes and property records. "Before we vote," I said, my voice steady, "I'd like to share something interesting I found." I watched Karen's smug smile fade as I showed photos of her violations on the projector screen, but that wasn't even the best part. Next came the proof that she'd been planning to use my donation meant for community improvements to build a fancy walkway to her own backyard spa. Mr. Rodriguez, our treasurer, stood up and confirmed every detail. Karen's face turned redder than her designer lipstick. "That's all lies." Karen jumped up, pointing at me. "You're just angry because I stopped your illegal construction." Her voice cracked as she realized no one was buying her act anymore. That's when our local news reporter, who Sarah had quietly invited, started taking notes. Karen noticed him too. For the first time, she looked scared. I wheeled forward. "Karen, I have permits for my pathway." "What permits do you have for your pool?" The room went so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. Karen grabbed her purse and headed for the door, but stopped when Mr. Rodriguez spoke up. "We still need to vote on the no confidence motion." She slumped back into her chair. The vote wasn't even close. Every hand went up to remove Karen from the board, even her best friend Linda's. As a final surprise, the community voted to make me the new board president, with Sarah and Mr. Rodriguez as my team. But here's what really made me smile. The next day, as workers rebuilt my pathway, neighbors kept stopping by, not to complain or argue, but to share cookies, offer help, or just chat. Miss Chen from across the street brought her famous dumplings. Tom from 2 doors down offered to plant flowers along the path edges. Even Linda came by to apologize for supporting Karen. We didn't just fix a pathway, we fixed our neighborhood. Now every Thursday we have community meetings in my accessible backyard. Karen still lives here, and yes, she had to remove her illegal pool. Sometimes I see her peeking through her curtains during our gatherings, watching us laugh and plan together. Last week we approved 3 new accessible pathways for elderly neighbors. Mr. Rodriguez says our community fund has never been healthier, and Sarah started a committee to help neighbors understand HOA rules. Clearly the funniest part, Karen now has to submit a request form every time she wants to change her garden gnome's outfit. Those are the rules, and this time everyone follows them equally. My pathway looks better than ever with solar lights that Sarah picked out and benches where neighbors actually stop to talk. It's not just my accessible entrance anymore, it's become the heart of our community, and every time I will down it I remember how standing up to a bully helped us all find something we didn't know we were missing. Real community spirit. Who knew a broken pathway could build such strong bridges between neighbors? The information in this video is for informational and entertainment purposes only. HOA rules and laws vary by state and community.